Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to take a look inside Pacific Tide, the United States versus Japan, 1941 to 45. This is a game designed by Greg Smith and published by Compass Games. This is one of those games that I think will appeal to a lot of people due to the fact that it's more of a low complexity game, and I think you could throw on a table and knock out in an evening without a problem, even on your first time. So at least that's the impression I've gotten of the game so far, but that remains to be seen. I'll have to take a look at it and see for sure. But let's take a look at the back of the box and see what this game's all about. Pacific Tide, the United States versus Japan, 1941 to 45, is a compact strategic level game covering the struggle between the United States, including some Commonwealth forces, and Japan in World War II by game designer Gregory M. Smith. This game utilizes a unique and fast-paced card-driven combat build system revolving around carrier operations, which will provide players with a multitude of decisions. Pacific Tide is a strategic-level game featuring operational and even tactical nuances, as players must decide when and how to commit their carrier forces, land-based air, and even their intelligence assets. To a degree, the Japanese player is racing against the clock. The quality of his pilots degrades over time, and starting in 1943, he also loses the strategic initiative to undertake initial actions. The U.S. player is also fighting the clock and cannot sit back and take a relaxed approach in defeating Japan. If he doesn't win by 1945, he doesn't win at all. Tension builds as both sides race towards decisive carrier battles and the seizure of key geographical objectives. It says here, you are placed in command to turn the tide of the Pacific War. Pacific Tide features a card-based combat build system that is a departure from the customary event operations points-driven system. Separate card decks are provided for the US and Japanese. Each year, the players receive that year's cards for free, but build points are expended to repurchase older cards. This prompts tension-filled dilemmas as one cannot rebuy every card. Players must then decide which aspect of cards to use. Many have multiple but exclusive uses, such as do A or do B, and each can drive a very different result. To help ensure a tense and dynamic game, the system forces players to make many choices and decisions throughout play, whether playing against an opponent or using the personality-driven solitaire bot system. And it says here, game comes with one 17 by 22 inch map, one counter sheet, 52 game cards, 2 player aid cards, a rules booklet, and 16 six-sided dice. That's a lot of dice. And here's an example of the components that you're going to get in the game: the cards, the counters, and the map. It says here the complexity is 3 out of 10. Time scale is single year turns with alternating multiple card plays. Map scale is an area map. Unit scale, individual carriers or carrier groups, fleets, army level infantry, air groups. And it's 1 to 2, best at 2 players. Solitaire suitability is 8 out of 10 with the solitaire bot system, and average play time is 2 to 4 hours. That is a look at the back of the box of Pacific Tide. So let's take a look inside and see what you get. All right, we get our card deck and our 16d6. A nice fold out from Compass Games, a catalog that shows you everything that you can get through their website. Our rule book, counter sheet, and player aids, and then the map. So I'm going to lay out the map and we'll take a look at the rest of the components after that. All right, so here's the map for Pacific Tide. It is a pretty straightforward, easy to understand map. It's point-to-point movement. The map graphics look really good. I think it makes a nice presentation on the table, but not overly busy, which is great. So easy to understand what's going on at all spots on the map. At the top of the map, you have a current Japanese build point track, an attack matrix up in the top right, which tells you how many dice to use for each attack. And then you have your card deck area for current year. And then you have the legend of what each location is, if it is Japanese controlled, US controlled, Commonwealth controlled, or if it has fleet repair location, oil resource area, things like that. So everything is pretty well laid out on the map. Should not be difficult at all to understand. Even for first-time wargamers, I think this is the type of game that you could probably, or newer wargamers, this is something you can easily pick up. And then we have our 2 player aids, and they are double-sided, with the first side actually giving you the sequence of play, summary of key points, attack limitations, retreat after combat, retreat after naval combat, and amphibious attacks, as well as the attack matrix, the same that is on the map over on the top right. So this explains to you everything that you'll need for the game itself. And on the back is the solitaire aid, and the solitaire aid is not meant to be like a full free-thinking bot. This is something that will give you direction as far as telling you what cards to use in the game and things like that. It will definitely challenge you, but it takes a lot of the load off of the gamer to make all of the decisions, but you will still need to make some decisions for the AI itself. So next we'll take a look at the counter sheet. And here we have our US counters, Japanese counters, and our admin counters. Pretty simple, easy to understand counters. You have air, you have naval units, and the same here for the Japanese. And there are some infantry here. There's infantry over here for the US and some more aircraft down here. Very simple, easy to understand counters. Not a lot to throw anybody off here at all, I don't think. And these are double-sided counters, and they look pretty good. So I think that's going to be pretty easy to pick up. Next, we'll take a look at the rule book for Pacific Tide. All right, so here's the rule book for Pacific Tide. It is listed as up to page 13. It actually goes to page 15. You have 2 pages at the end there for the counter manifest, so that helps you in case you lose any of your counters. You can just recreate them off of what's at the back of the book. The designer's notes here on page 12 in the solitaire play aid is also on 12. The rules starting on page 2. It actually ends on page 11, so that's 9 pages. If you take out the first couple pages here of just the explanation of the components and stuff, you're looking at really about 7 pages of rules, so not a hard rule book to digest and get on the table pretty quick. You have here the description, victory conditions, your counters, and your cards, explanation of those, and then how to set up the game. Has your campaign game set up for the US and Japanese, and then the midway scenario set up for the US and the Japanese. It explains the bidding process and then the gameplay, how the year starts, and then you go to move, attack, and then we get over here to attack matrix, and it explains how that works, and then additional attack limitations, and then an example of attack right here, an illustrated example of attack. Love that. Always a great thing to have in a rule book because it makes it easier to understand. Retreat after combat, amphib attacks, and then example of an amphibious attack here. Another illustrated example of play, a nice little picture to the Battle of Peleliu. And then we have placing units, repair of fleets, supply, guerrillas, and the year end. The Australia area capture, then the year end, and another example of this is of supply here, and then we get into the splitting of available cards and solitaire play aid here, and then the designer's notes, and then the game credits. So like I said, not a lot of rules, pages of rules to digest, so it looks like a pretty straightforward game. Here's your counter manifest. Then we're at the back of the book where there is a dedication to Robert Thomas and Richard Gliwa. And that is everything in the rule book. So like I said, looks like a pretty simple, straightforward rule book to understand and digest. Get this on the table real quick and play it in an evening. And that is a look at everything that comes inside Pacific Tide, the United States versus Japan, 1941 to 45. It is available from Compass Games on their website or at your favorite local game store or your online game store of choice. It is one that I really wanted to try to get a look at last year at WBC, but I was unable to catch up with the designer. Our schedules just kind of never meshed up. So now I'm excited to actually get a chance to put this on the table and give it a look, because it looks like it'll be pretty fun. Something I can knock out in a couple hours without any deep, rules digging through or anything like that. And that's always a great thing. It looks like it's got the right amount of depth with the cards and the choices to be made, but without having to have a ton of rules overhead. So we'll see if that is the way it plays out when I get a chance to play it. But I hope this helps you guys out. If you're interested in the game, if you have any comments or questions, post them down below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.